just hit the record button if you guys are, no, everybody's okay with it? Just make sure before I always record. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We've never had somebody say no, but you just never know, man. I just
You
always,
never know.
want to make sure.
Always
So,
like that.
I appreciate the small group today. I think this is going to be good, even though it was by mistake. That's okay. So, Almar, if somebody responds to you that they're coming in, I'll just let them in. But if not, maybe we get to those other people and we'll figure out the next month, why with the Google Meet went out. All right.
All right, understood that.
All right. No worries. Thanks, buddy. All right. Hold on. Let me share my screen. Just tell me when you can see it. If I can get there. Does it come through?
I see it. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So Carol, I know the other guy already does appreciate my humor, which is a little bit weird, but this is my picture from when I started Acquire Tech, and I'll just tell you a funny quick story because I leave it because it's my profile pic and these LinkedIn experts say to keep it, but I sent it to my family, who Bubba knows, my son, and both my daughter and my wife said, "Ew," was the text back because of the chin hair. And my son said, "Dad, have they stopped drug testing there at the company?" So very, very funny people. It's just, you raise them that way and you get it back. So it's all good. It's all good. So
yeah.
I'm Charlie Dino. Let me tell you a little bit about, I do this just so you can understand a little bit about how I got to this. So I was with General Electric for the beginning of my career, left there after growing a business 20% on the top line, and then they sold it. So it was my first time around a sale. And I was the guy in the room, and I was kind of happy in the executive team. I was the only one that the new owner said, "Hey, I have somebody that already does that." And I'm like, "All right, I get out of here," because I didn't want to be with a smaller firm at the time doing instrumentation services. So started on a journey, ended up going to ADP Total Source, and really did what we know in the technology world now as ITIL, IT Information Library. I kind of created my own based upon my Six Sigma background, then got a really good chance to really take my technology experience up a notch. I went to a company called Recall here in Atlanta. It was records information management. I ran IT as a regional CIO for US, Canada, Brazil, and Mexico for 5 years. And then did about 12 months of a systems consolidation globally, traveling all over the globe. And all of a sudden, Iron Mountain, who's very well known in that industry, bought Recall. So it was a $2 billion business buying a $1.5 billion business. And they asked myself and 3 other people to lead the integration efforts. So a lot of the principles I'll talk about are based on the 23 acquisitions we did when I was a CIO on an executive team, doing it all ourselves with our teams, and then also the Iron Mountain experience, and then the last 5 years of doing it with many, many businesses, which we'll talk about in a second. One guy here knows this, but I'm a big sports nut. I play a lot of tennis and still do that. I've stopped all the crazy like P90X and Insanity stuff because my hips were starting to degenerate. So had to stop all that, but I'm still I still pretend I'm 20, which is probably not smart, but it's good when it's good. So we started Acquire Tech in 18, so it'll be 5 years this May. My first time ever doing something from scratch. It's been a lot of fun. I'll tell you in a second about the rest of the story there, but we got our first deal in July of 18. I got lucky and had a big opportunity to just do a systems assessment and I got rights to use their names. So just so you know, I'm just throwing company names around. Brinks, the armored car company, their headquarters are in Dallas. They bought private armored car called Dunbar 5 years ago this summer. And I got a chance to do the systems assessment between the two. But I decided to take a different cut at it with my team as a small team at the time, which was how can we look at this not only from the systems perspective, but how the systems affect process efficiency, profitability, and then more importantly, are these systems that have, do you take them in whole, or are there feature functionalities that we should consider in the new or the new company? And then lastly, what does the back end look like? So I'll explain that when we get into this a little bit. But what happened when we started the company, when I looked at it, I went out and dusted off my MBA notebooks, because I was doing notebooks back then, and just started to think about, like, so let's do a business case. And I went out and started talking to people to see, do they feel the same way I did when I was at Recall and Iron Mountain. The first one was definitely true. It holds true 5 years into this, is that burdening your current employees with integration goals, and I qualify that with in whole, like 100%, while holding them to their current role objectives. One, you burn people out, and two, you don't get to your synergies as quickly. So that's the first one. The second one is something I've experienced a lot. There's nothing wrong with it, but I just would, explain to you what we're trying to do different, is that you have a big consulting firm come out. A lot of them are competitors. They don't play in my space as much, but they try to once in a while in the mid-market and above. But they'll come in. They've got, great ideas, great process. It's probably someone like me that's been experienced in it. And then you start the integration process, and all of a sudden you've got all these junior associates that are new to the firm. There's nothing wrong with that. They're following a prescribed process, which we have as well, which I'll explain some things we've done to get around that. But in essence, they are at that point not able to deal with what I call the curveballs in acquisition integration. And I'll explain how we do that and some ideas for you guys. And then every acquisition fits an integration model 100%. I'm going to dispel that today, and I'll show you why as we go through this. So any questions before we go through agenda? All right, and after a couple slides, I'm going to come off just for discussion, especially we have a smaller group, and hopefully that'll be good. So here's the agenda.
I have a
client.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Gary. Yeah.
So do you see yourself as really more of a facilitator for the change agent, or I guess are you trying, because of these? I had these same conversations. That's the reason I asked this question.
Yep.
Because when I talk to the IT guys, the Ernst and Young or the SAP guys, they don't want any help with integration with customers. And yet when I talk to customers, they're like, oh, we're so tapped, we don't have the resources internally. And so when I ask the obvious question, which I'm not trying to I see there's a value for what you're doing beyond what those two guys are doing, is okay. My question is, well, if that's all true, then why are 70% of these failing? Why are more than 2/3 of these failing if both of you guys feel like you have what you are trying to do? And I never really got the answer. So I'm actually really interested to hear this, because go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think I've got a couple answers, but I'd love your opinion on it. I just from experience and now advising, I think we got a couple of answers in here. So let me, and then I'll highlight them as we go through the couple things that I think have when we do them, changes it. And I've got a lot of good use cases as to the results. I mean, that what we've done, and I'll bring those up as we go through. So so we'll go through client integration best practices. It's what I had identified and then used in our process. Acquisition integration, talent selection committee, it's something we use. So I'm going to show you a couple tools we use as well to kind of help things along. We do something called an IT health assessment. That's part of this in due diligence. The only due diligence that I do. I partner with others if they want to do quality of earnings, et cetera. I'll explain that to you. And then sell side integration, which has become a very hot topic. I got into it 4 years ago before the topic became hot. I'd gone somewhere here in Atlanta to a symposium and started talking to somebody about it. And I'll tell you the use case on that. I've got some things from current state of M&A market. I went to ACG M&A South at the Avalon back in early February. I do that every year. And then I also just went to CEO Executive Summit with a bunch of M&A firms and an M&A law firm here in town about 3 weeks ago. So I'll give you some of the latest, what I heard there. All right, we ready? Everybody good? Carol, you still there?
Oh, yeah.
All right, cool. No, it's good. I when you have the camera on the corner, I can't see anybody. So sorry. So let me go through the first part. So talent. I mentioned one of them in my case for the business when I started it, is you don't burden your current team with all the responsibilities unless it's part of their yearly objectives. So I've seen a couple of different structures that have worked. One is if they're highly acquisition active, that they dedicate a team 100%. When I say 100%, that's their job. They don't do anything else to the upfront acquisition identification, the due
Mhm.
diligence. Usually they find somebody to do the quality of earnings outside, and then starting to plan the synergies and what they see as the high level, and then handing it off to an integration team where we've identified something I talk about in here called an integration management office or organization, and I can explain that to you. But that works a lot better. And then just throwing it on your current team and saying, hey, we think we have a process. And I know you've got a job that I've given you all these yearly objectives, but I still need to make this date to get my synergies or the return on it that you've been looking for. And we've proven, and I'll talk about it as I go through the presentation, that when you do it with either 100% dedication on your side, or what we do is we have a structure in the integration management organization, which I talk about in the next slide, where we can do it hand in hand, still get the subject matter expertise. I think that's one of the reasons, Carrie, that some of these fail, which I'll explain, is that they come in as an Ernst and Young and they think they know it, right? We know it, we know our process. They don't know the industry, and that's a huge
Right.
problem if you lose the subject matter
Huge piece.
expertise. So that's one of the big reasons, and I'll explain to you what we do. And then when outsourcing, I already told you this about the junior resource. The only reason I say that, it's nothing wrong with it. It's that everything you'll see in here is about how do I get to the synergies as quickly as possible in a quality fashion? Because that's what this is about, right? You've made the acquisition, you're looking for synergies, competitive, positives that you're going to get. There's a lot of different things, but they're all at the end hitting your P&L financially. And when you have somebody that doesn't understand the process or can't understand the curveball, which I'll explain in a second what we do, then you're losing time. So this is really, if you think about it too, like you think about process and theory, you've ever heard like most processes or efforts you're making, you don't want a lot of starts and stops, right? Because you start and stop and you just keep doing that and you never get to the end. That's what the predication is here that we go with. Execution. This is big that I've found on our advisement is you've made an acquisition, you have assets on the other side. Don't assume that your process, your systems, and your people should be used over the new acquisition. And I talk about that a little bit in the next slide, but I'll hit each one of those as far as it's fool's gold, because I've been in a lot of them and I was a part of a lot of them where we thought, well, we're the better in the scenario here. And I went through one as well that I'll tell you a bad story from Recalled Iron Mountain, that a lot of people still in the executive side that are my clients now have a bad taste in their mouth, and I'll explain to you what happened there. This is the point about the junior consultants, and one of the major points back to this 70% mark is a lot of these firms get a process. Either they're handed it from an outside consulting firm like us, or they're going arm in arm. And what they say, and I can tell you this 100%, is these other firms, they say our process is proven over thousands and thousands of integrations. It works 100% of the time for every single acquisition. And I would tell you that's wrong. Is that
Wow.
5 to 10% of every acquisition is different, even in the same industry. You have things thrown at you, especially in the world that's emerging with new technologies, where said technologies, they could change in the industry, or somebody has an old technology. You never know what you're going to run into. So we leave our processes extremely repeatable. I mean, it's got a Six Sigma underpinning, but I leave 5 to 10% of it, and I'll explain that in the next couple of slides as to why we do that and how we do that to customize the integration to whoever we're working with at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is focus your process prioritizations and efforts on the greatest ROI and synergy opportunities. This is the one that I'd put on here, but it probably wouldn't be professional. I think the duh moment. Yeah, we all know that, but I'll show you what we do to focus on that and make sure that everybody's pulling in the same direction to make that happen. And then the last point here is transformation. So something I've been out there saying for a while, and love discussion on it, is that in all of my experience before Acquire Tech and now the last 5 years with 200, actually it's probably 300 plus integrations, some small, some big, is that billing is overlooked in a lot of these. And what I mean by that is I've been in a lot of these where it's well, let's start flipping the markets, let's start flipping the customers so we get the efficiencies, we'll get the synergies. And it's like, okay, and then there's this crazy conversation that I've seen happen a lot that we don't do in ours, and I am adamant about it because I don't think it's going to lead to success for the partnership, is to say, yeah, but we can still like send them the old bill. Well, you just, and here's why I say this, you've sent out your executive team members, your account managers, whoever it may be, that's the new relationship to this new customer that you've brought in. And this is what happens. You guys probably both know this. Your season is going to be great. It's going to be seamless. It's going to be so good for you as the client. It's all these positives, right? And then what happens is AP gets that very first bill that is NewCo. So you flip the market, you flip the product, whatever it is to merge and integrate. And it's not if it's not explained and it's not accurate, it is a bad moment. I call it a moment of truth in acquisition integration, is because what's going to happen is that person's going to start calling up the line and eventually escalate to the person that was talked to about how good this was going to be. And every acquisition is made typically, I would love to hear it, even if not, to retain said revenue and profitability, right? So what is that customer, their revenue, and hopefully profitability? What are they going to start doing after your services have come up with a bad bill? They're going to go, I don't have time for this. Let's just, when the contract's up, let's just start looking for new vendors, whoever the person is that's, third in the market or fourth, whatever it may be. So that's a big moment for us and one of our big measures. We have a lot of others, but we believe in that. And then the last one on best practices, and then we'll talk details into each of these in our process. And the next slide is, don't assume that your current IT project management office or operational project management office or your group of project managers can run an integration on their own. A lot of them are going to raise their hand when you ask them, and they're going to say, yes, I've done this before. What's the reasons? The reasons are legit. It's one, they're worried about their place in the new world. So they're going to say, yeah, I can do it. And they're going to read a lot of books and figure it out, etc. Two, they've only been through one integration in their career, and maybe it wasn't truly an integration. We find a lot where people say that to us, and then we go, describe what you're talking about. It's a divestiture. It's a lot different than an integration, right? Nothing wrong with it. We do carve outs as well, which a lot of divestitures, we do that. But it's this integration management organization again. And let me just explain that to you real quick. And if you want to see it offline, I'd be glad to meet with you and show it to you. Is basically what we do, depending on the size of the acquisition. We'll have somebody from the client at the top, somebody from our side at the top, kind of running point on everything's program. And then we will assign integration success managers to each of the different functions that is being integrated. If it's a big one, all of them. And that integration success manager will team with a subject matter expert from each function. And those people were only looking for 10, maybe 20% of their time so that we don't lose the spirit of the subject matter expertise in that function in your industry. And then it's all run with, and I'll show you next in the next slide, it comes up around our playbook and our integration planning, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the use cases we have, I've got many, but it's just one of the ones I'm really proud of, is our very first one. I wanted to prove this out. And so it was that Dunbar acquisition was a 100 locations here in the States that had to flip over to NewCo. It was 9,000 customers with 90,000 customer locations. And we were able to integrate it all in 18 months. They got, I wish I had a, there's no way for me to ever do this, so I kid around. Is if there was ever a way for me to get in on the synergy percent, I would love to, but you can't predict it. But they went from, it was 75% more than what they thought. So surpassed my expectations. I did it to prove this out, that I think it's the right way to do things. And, here's the good news for me. I said I wanted the percentage. That client's still my client almost 5 years later because of what we did. So we try to take that, because my belief is, before I ask questions from you guys or go to the next slide, is I'd say this to our team all the time, if we fumble on these, or let's say we just totally don't get it right, that doesn't work in this industry, especially with guys with our name is great. I'm sure you can figure out what we do, but I mean, if I'm an Ernst & Young, yeah, I probably get another shot because I've got name recognition and cover my basis if something goes wrong, if I'm the firm and the executive team and the board. But we don't have that luxury. So we take this extremely seriously, that we cannot have missteps or failures. And I just so you know how passionate I am about that statement, just had breakfast this morning with the CEO of the big business here in Atlanta, publicly traded. We're doing an integration from is his team kept, even though we had this presentation, I went out on site, talked about planning. His team kept giving us excuses why they couldn't get to something. And I said to him, listen, this is going to be a good moment for us. I hope is I'm checking out. I'm not going to sign off on this as a choir tech if this isn't going to be followed. And we just had a great conversation. We're getting everybody back on the same page and getting this done in 3 months. We had a 6-month ramp. So that's how passionate I am about this, is that I was going to fire a customer today. So questions?
I have one in relation to your transformation. This is actually that element is absolutely right, what you're talking about there from the customer. But what I've run into, Charlie, is the vendors as well as the customer. That change. And a lot of times, I'll give you an example. One of the reasons I ended up studying what I did was because of an Oracle implementation with icing on top of cupcakes. Yeah. And they took 5 billion. It was 4 companies, $1.5 billion each. They turned them all into one $5 billion company.
Yep.
When they did the transition, all the billing worked fine. What didn't work is they changed the operations managers into the warehouse, into the guys putting the invoicing in for the vendors. In 90 days, every single vendor shut them out of operations here in Atlanta because none of those were done. And it was because the Oracle team, not blaming Oracle, but the implementation integration team, they focused on the sales and the customer. But they forgot all about the vendors and how this changed, as well as internally, what is it going to mean for your job changing today versus before. So those integration steps, buddy, you are right on there. That is why there is no 2 implementations the same, because they're the same people are not in every one.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you got it.
You guys are on stuff there. So
spot on. I appreciate it. And that's from going through pain when I was at honestly. We did silly things, and then I was part of the new executive team when I went in, and that's when we got our president. Now he's the CEO of one of my clients. He was like, we're not doing this anymore. And he threw it all on us, but it was fine. I know we could have gotten our synergies quicker. So it's all good. I appreciate your feedback. Carol, you got anything before I go back to the next slide?
No, I'm just listening in.
You're good.
Great conversation.
No worries. All right. So can you guys see this?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So next thing is I go through the integration keys, and this bridges from the last slide, but what we do to try to ensure at the beginning of the process that everything's defined and that we've got a good plan as to how we're going to get to the end game is we do a communicated planning playbook. So what does that mean? It means we've worked with whoever the due diligence is on the front end, even if we weren't a part of it. We'll come in at LOI, letter of intent, or at signature, and we'll start to say, hey, can we put together a planning playbook with you? And here's what we do with it. We truly try to understand. So when you guys made the decision or are about to make the decision to purchase this, what was it based on? Like, what did you think you were going to get out of it? What are the financial returns? And here's where I think this has changed, and it might be back to, Carrie, what you were talking about, the 70% failure rate. I believe this is that there's this gap, and it continues today from people who go out and do the due diligence. Sometimes it's an outsourced firm to the integration team.
Yes.
And then the integration team gets it, and they're making decisions based upon their own assumptive beliefs, and they don't understand what was put in that initial look at it. And so we immediately come in and say, let's look at that together, and just understand it. Like, understand what are you trying to get out of this, so that we can put together all of the planning towards that. And the last thing we do in there, and then we take it to another level, and I'll tell you the different tools we use. We use a couple, is synergy goals by department, that those are always in front of them. Whatever you told them was going to happen needs to be in front of them. And I'll explain that as we get into the next couple of bullets here. But the other one we feel like is a key to bridging the gap from due diligence to integration is access to the due diligence team. I know that sounds simple, but here's why is if you're getting into total acquisition mode, which Carol, you said you guys might be looking again, is those people who are out front looking, a lot of times either go back to their day jobs or they're looking for the next one. And it's hard to get in touch with them sometimes. And so all we mean by this is that you have easy, quick access to just ask a question if you need it. Hey, I just need to make sure I understand this. This one's getting better with technology, quite frankly, that you could ping somebody via, Teams or Slack or whatever it may be, but we still say, hey, this is important. And this is really for the due diligence team and the executives. This isn't for the integration team. This is to say to those people that I'm advising is, hey, this is important. Just make sure these guys know this and it's come from top down.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, it's stuck. Oh, here we go. So we do two things after that. We do, and we've done them condensed and really large for a very large acquisition. We do what's called an integration design planning session, where we create these launch books. And I always give the example, it's an easy one from the first one we did. And we've got many others like this, but this is location based, so I think it's easier to understand. Is they were flipping, they called the acquisition red, their own stuff blue, red to blue, right? So, and old code and new code, whatever you want to call it. And so we said to their two sides of their business, armored car and cash processing, bring your subject matter experts from both sides. You acquired and you the acquirer. Let's sit in a room and go through this. So here's what we did though, is we said, here's some guiding rules. One, nothing's wrong here. You decide together in both sides. How do you get to the end game without worrying about the following things? The HR system, the HR practices, the finance system, the finance practices, the legal system, the legal practices, the operational to an extent, but just think that you've got runway to do this the way you would do it. So they start putting it together. What we did was, and we still do this today, is we go to the end and we say, okay, let's look at it together and see, like, now present it to each other, both sides of your business, because you guys are the subject matter experts here, and let's see what you come up with, right? So they come up with, it's a great session to get to know each other. You also get to know, just so you guys know what I tell my executives that are our partners and clients, you get to kind of see the three different types of people in that situation, which is the adopters, the, hey, you know what? I'm okay with this. And then the detractors. And are the detractors savable or are they not? So we get asked that a lot. But at the end, we have them presented out to their executive team. So I'm just going to tell you guys, I hadn't been in consulting till 5 years ago. So this was a shock to me that somebody would come up to me and go, I was really impressed. I said, well, thanks. About the process? They go, no, that you let our team present. I'm like, well, why would I present? That's their work. I facilitated in my process and I'll be there. The second one we do is important, and I'll tell you quickly. We bring all the dependencies in now. So the HR team, the finance team, some of the IT, we leave some of them out, depends, and then legal. And we start to fill in the gaps on each market as we're flipping it or whatever it is that we're doing, product, service, technology. And the easy example I give you here why this is important is in that very first analogy or use case, I had already gotten wind that the HR executive was going to come in and say, this doesn't work for me, and just blow up the entire week we just did. I was like, why? And he's like, they're like, because we're going to Workday. And I'm like, okay. So I had it. I knew he was going to bring it up. I said, well, let's just, humor me for a second with a question is, would you have done Workday regardless of this acquisition? He goes, yeah, it's a SOX audit finding. We got to get off ADP and go to Workday. Okay, great. So would you, if you would have done it anyway, why would you stop markets from flipping until you're ready for Workday when you could just do ADP? And then the day that you're ready for Blue, your legacy business for Workday, we'll just go ahead and start flipping anything forward and we'll flip the ones back. And you don't stop people from getting to their synergies. I know it's a simple one and there's more complex that we deal with, but that's what it's about, is getting this subjective nonsense is what I call it. So it's being recorded. Subjective nonsense out of the way. I know that poor person. We're friends. Hopefully he hears this. I think he's admitted now that made sense. But just get it out of the way so that we don't have to deal with the politics, etc. So that's why we do these two. I want to be very specific that we call them launch books because from here become project plans. These are not project plans. These are above project plans. They're saying, here's how we get there. Very high level. Now we need to put in all of your project management principles around it, having been a former project manager. So questions on that, comments?
No,
All
makes
right. I
sense.
talked about this, so we don't have to talk about this again. See, I will tell you, and for the quick, I get excited and I talk about some of these before the slides, so I've been trying to be better about that, but it's something I'm passionate about. This is something we use. If you guys ever want to see it, it's hard to do it in the presentation because I need to show it, but I hybrided it originally before integrations. In my recall regional CIO role, I had people at the table, 10 of them arguing with each other from functions around who gets my, the technology resources, who gets this. And so I came up with, it's a hybrid QFD model from Six Sigma, but basically it's a project prioritization. It's got the same principles. You weight your financial drivers on the top, you got your projects on your left. We start to go through and ask them, hey, is this high likelihood per your 5 drivers that are weighted financially, somewhat likely, minimal likelihood? It scores them out. Here's why we do this, and I do it even outside of integration for people. We've started to, you guys familiar with OKRs? That's the new how you track objectives. Okay, cool. So this process goes really well with OKRs. I didn't know it until I started presenting it. But the only reason I do it in our integration planning and process is because I know the ones, and they will too, that are going to be highly prioritized. There might be a few surprises, and then the ones that are low prioritized, it's the ones in the middle. It's again to stop the starts and the stops from happening. It's the ones in the middles that we go, hey, we all agreed this was higher than the other. If you want to rescore it, we can do that. But let's not fight about it. Let's hit this one first. We'll hit this one next. And it's another one that can keep me from stopping the train from getting down the tracks. So questions on that? Comments? Last one here on this slide, Synergy Tracker. We've used Smartsheet. We've used Monday. They're all fine. But somewhere where you're tracking the synergies, but also the cost of the projects and the duration of the project to those synergy goals. And here's why. We ran into, before I started Acquire Tech, I realized it when I was at Iron Mountain, was the first time I realized it. We were in the middle of I had all the operational projects globally, and I had somebody tell me when I went back to them that was on my team, they're like, yeah, we changed the duration. Well, what? Okay, explain. Yeah, we went from 12 to 18 months. I'm like, well, there's a cost to that. Now you're going to add another 6 months of cost. So it's 1.5 times now. And they're like, yeah, but that's what it took. And I said, yeah, but if you had told me about it, what I would have done at the time is I would have done one of two things. Said, you're good to go. I'm going to increase cost. Or I would have said, I'm going to decrease scope and we'll deal with it later because the synergies come back, right? And all it was that person didn't have something they were tracking to. We tried to build something called Acquire Track. I just realized we used it internally, but there wasn't enough to it to give to businesses. And then Smartsheet came out, and I'm like, this is what I've been looking for. Let's build it in there. So we have something there, and we have something in, we've done it in Monday one time too, to track all that for our clients. Questions before we hit the next slide? I want to leave a little time at the end to talk. Sorry that we got started late. This is quick. This is a talent selection committee. We started to get asked this. I do not, by the way, we are not an HR integration team or company. We do not do anything in that realm, but we were asked, hey, could you guys look at your talent? And I'm like, yeah, I think I could do that. So we did. It's called a talent selection committee. We put it together with our client. We've used it elsewhere now. We have it's a template. I wouldn't call it anything more than that. It's a template to judge the competency, tenure, language proficiency. It does all of that. The reason we did language the first time we did that, it was a project we had in the Netherlands, and most of the firms spoke Dutch. You talk about it's really cool using virtual like we're doing. We recorded a lot and went and listened back. Now there's more tools to do that, so we understood what was being said. But the firm out of UK that was purchasing them, they needed to know that. Like they might keep somebody that's in the backside of the business in technology, for instance, that didn't need to necessarily be English proficient, but there were others that they needed to know. So we kind of rated all that, gave them scores, and then they made their decisions. Why did I start doing this? It wasn't just to say, we're not that firm and I'm not that guy that goes, yeah, I can figure it out. I did this because of what I said earlier about resources. Is to me, they are one of the most, if not the most important in these acquisitions. And there's a lot of times where it's penny wise, pound fool, where you just go, hey, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and give the package to the person we just acquired. And you miss out on talent. And you can hear the passion. And let me tell you why quickly. When we got purchased by Iron Mountain, I survived. I actually did the 3 years they wanted me to stay. But there were a bunch of my counterparts that what we were told when we were going through due diligence with them is this song and dance of we're going to keep the best of the best. It's going to be the best in records information management the history's ever seen. Great. And all of a sudden it was like, well, that's not happening. I know that person and I know the person from Iron Mountain because the industry was pretty together. And I'm like, that didn't happen. And there's a lot of people still in very high level organizations now that when I meet up with them, this still comes up. I still can't believe they did that. That's how much it bothered people, right? So this is an important one and we do it, but we also have partners that do it. So if you're going to use anything with us or this as a discussion, certainly keep in mind that sometimes the better talent is coming across from the other side. And right now, I mean, this could change if the recession, when it hits and how bad it is. But what we've been seeing lately is people have been able to say, I'm going to look at one-to-one. I'm going to keep this person. Maybe it's from the acquisition side. My legacy side person, I've got another role I can put them in because I'm having trouble finding labor. And here's the really cool part is we've had a number of occasions recently where that person that got put in the new role said, oh, thank God I was getting tired of this role. Okay, well, you guys need to go back and look at your HR practice. Obviously, this person, you didn't know that they were disappointed in the role they were in. So this is really quick. This is our IT due diligence online tool. We do this for PE firms, for our corporate acquisition or firms that are in acquisition mode. I did this because I wanted to do something quick in 3 weeks that highlighted where the intermediate and rudimentary areas were in their technology space. This is the full on. What we've started doing for smaller or for firms, because we're doing this outside of acquisition now, that don't know what they have or want to know what they have from a technology perspective. We start with information security, infrastructure and platform, IT service management, but we include applications in here if we just do the three. And then if you want to add, we typically, the next logical would be if you have software development, we add that. Testing, we add that. And then the last two for this full on. You get CIO, CTO oversight. I'm one of them. There's 4 of us. But this is the reason we've started to do it and why it's worked in this second space. This is one of the things we do in new executive leadership, but let's focus on the buy sell due diligence. It gives better EBITDA pluses and minus multiples on the plus or minus. That's why we do it. And it is prescriptive. We've got 400 best practices on a back-end database that we utilize based on all of our assessments. We right-size those. That's why I said we realize sometimes we only do 3 of them, the core 3, because not everybody needs 400 questions. I mean, it's, we right-size it to 40 questions, et cetera. But people have started to use the tool as well for, this is where I didn't know it was going, is directional ROI spend in their tech space, and then to align their strategy to business objectives. What happened is we created this for my space that started in an acquisition integration for due diligence, and some of our clients started saying, hey, can we use that for this, this, and this? So it is what it is. We'll go through that. This is what you get real quick. If you do have some due diligence or other needs for it, you get it's online. You get an online dashboard, shows all our findings. It's interactive, statistically scored, shows where you are overall, each of the sections. And then what I think is cool, we do recommendations. We have the courage and the expertise to make recommendations and do a t-shirt size on cost. But this is the value, is we identify where you have high risk, medium risk, low risk. And then we say to you, hey, here where you have high risk, look at all these that you have that you potentially could hit with small costs. So I give an example. If you're not aware of it, like disk encryption, very easy. If your devices aren't encrypted, it's extremely risky. It's a small cost. So that's what we do with it, just to help our clients. And this will relate to sell side integration when I get to that as well. So real quick, let's get into that because this is one of my favorites. I'm just going to pull them up so I can just talk. We 3 years ago got approached by guys I used to work with. They're at a firm in Columbia now that does electric perimeter fencing. And they came to us and said, hey, we have a PE that has us right now, but we know we're going to get sold in 3 years. We have an idea. The guy that was the COO was the guy that was arm in arm with me on these integrations of recall. He's like, remember us talking about if we could improve things, it would give a better multiple on the sale. I'm like, yeah, so let's try it. So we do exactly what we do in integration. We start looking at the billing health, integrations, DRP, operational processes, the systems. I mean, basically the same process I just went through without maybe as much rigor on the front end planning. And we've got now 2, I think 3 cases, and hopefully more as with a group that really is interested, because they represent the seller, is to try to get them more attractive from a offering perspective and increase their multiple. So that's what sell side integration means. And it's become bigger. There's a lot of firms now doing it. Particularly, they'll go out and buy a asset company, and then they go in and start looking at these opportunities that are on screen here, and they go back and sell it for a multiple. So, which is kind of cool because then you're getting handed something. I liken it to real estate. Basically, what they're doing is they're going in and rehabbing a home, or and then just selling it for a higher rate. So flipping it. We'll call it flip it. Current state of the M&A market. So just so you guys know, I left some stuff from the pandemic that I'll just tell you is really cool. I think people are still doing driving distance deals, which is kind of cool. They never did that before. They were always looking for the big stuff, everywhere. Remote quality of earnings. This upsets my friends that I partner with in the big CPA firms here in Atlanta. Is they always wanted to go on site and in the dark of night to do the quality of earnings. Now you can do them virtually, which is kind of cool. It speeds things up. If you got to go on site, maybe it's once. This we're doing right now. We in the tech world had embraced this a long time ago, and now everybody's had to embrace it. And this is the new number I got. So it was I was surprised at this. It was 1.2 trillion total in 21. It only came down to 1.1 trillion. So 22 was another crazy year. The things I heard while I was there for you guys, I heard these things that make sense. One, that if somebody's going to sell a business, they probably should have done it in fourth quarter last year, but they still have a chance in first and second quarter this year if the deal had already started in the beginning of the year to get a good deal out. There's still going to be a lot of deals done in 23, the way they'll get done. And this is what I call the fool's gold sometimes when you see some of these numbers like this one. That's the total deal revenue. Well, deals are still probably going to be active. They're just going to get creative in how they do it. And so the creativity will be the following. They will start to look at max debt deals, which is increased ROI instead of banking debt. Seller notes, so they'll pay a high percent on, and then debt finance will be dealt with on the seller note later. So that's what a seller can do. An earnout, like the seller and buyer go into these 2-year purchase prices for when we come out of the recession, and then buyer equity is the last one. So that's how these will all get done, because debt right now is expensive. You're not going to get the traditional acquisitions like you've seen the last couple of years a lot, but you might, especially in recession resistant industries where they might be looking at, hey, this is a good time for me to acquire this kind of deal. And the only other one I share, and then I'm done, I'll open to questions, is I just highlight this one. This was from due diligence from after the pandemic. This is just amazing, Carol and Carrie. I went to ACG 2 years in a row. So last year I go, and they're starting to talk a little bit about culture, character, capital, technology. This year blew my mind. It was like they wanted to talk to me. I had card stock, old school, but I did on purpose for our IT health assessment because, on online IT due diligence. And I did it just because I can't pull this up. And I'm just like, here. And people loved it. Carrie, you get my sense of humor. Hopefully, Carol will. I'm like, you could throw this away afterwards. I just wanted something to talk to you with. So, but our owner, Matt, just told me yesterday at breakfast that he actually heard from people that were there. They were like, hey, I saw your company name on something for like an assessment. What it tells me, it's not about us. It's that people in this space are starting to see there's a benefit to looking at this stuff. So I hope, Carrie, you mentioned it earlier, I hope that's going to go to the 70% terrible number that we have in the industry. I think a lot of these guys and girls doing the deals up front they were always just worried about the return. That's just face facts. That's what they were. I got frustrated my first 2 years starting this up, trying with PEs and the like, because it was, yeah, we like, but you know what? At the end of the day, we don't really care about that. It's we're getting our returns anyway. Things were good then. I think they realize now we're going into a world that maybe we got a recession, but I don't know if you guys have heard this yet or not. And I got to get the firm's name that I've heard this through Vistage. They're a think tank. This big analysis around technology that the next 10 years, it might be 9 now because this was last year, we will have more technological innovation than we've had the 100 years
Yes.
prior.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah.
So they have no choice anymore, quite frankly, than to
Yeah.
start looking at technologies. So that's
Well,
kind of
that assessment you do, or that you're working with on the integration side, is part of the reason why the 70% exists, Charlie, because people don't typically quantify what does success look like, right?
Right.
So they go into these integrations and implementations, and this includes the software guys, and say, yes, we'll put Oracle and we'll start going. Well, what does success look like? No one bothers to ask that question ahead of time, which it looks like you guys are doing, which is really good.
Trying.
And so you'll be able to measure, the 70% doesn't come out of the air. That's actually they've been multiple studies, and that's kind of that 65 to 75 is the number that's been reported. So that's the reason I bring it up. But what you're doing will actually get you there quicker, especially with that transformative state analysis, both on the revenue and the vendor relationships as well. So
I appreciate it.
This is definitely a missing piece between the technology and really the companies, and even without technology, you got organizational changes. You guys are doing some good stuff. So that's
I appreciate it, buddy.
That's
Carol,
good.
anything from you?
Yeah, a great presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I think one of the things that keeps coming to mind is how much do you prep the new co-CEO for all of this when they have not been through a transaction themselves and have never done an integration? Because one of my biggest challenges right now is my boss, who's our CEO, has no idea what this looks like.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to advise, even identifying targets, how we identify those synergies up front, what the due diligence needs to look like. But
you say it's I just want to make sure I heard, is it a him?
Yes.
Okay. I'm doing this for a couple other people. I've got Choice Insurance Agency. There's a couple other where I'll do this presentation for their executive team. And I would even be willing, I could do it virtually or I'll come in person because it's good for me to get the word out, and also could be good for our business model. So that's part of what we do, right? So if you're interested in that, I definitely am going to stay in touch with the guy on the left because we haven't talked. I'm sorry I haven't talked to you in a couple of years, buddy. I've been slammed worse and then the oldest one got married in August, so we were dealing with that for a year.
I haven't called either, Charlie.
I know, I appreciate that. Appreciate it. So, but Carol, what I'll do is I'm going to get in touch with both of you offline. I usually do with everybody on these. And I'd love to talk to him, and then let's see what we can do to help you, because I am trying to crack what Carrie said is that 70% number. Maybe I just need to start saying it at the beginning. So I appreciated you doing it. A lot of people do when they come on, is that's a reality in this world, is 70% of these integrations fail. So,
and there's a lot of things you presented that people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Appreciate that.
So, you nailed it, Carol. That's the biggest right there.
I appreciate that. So, all right. Well, listen, thanks for both of you attending. Carol, sorry you were out on that Google Meet. I apologize.
No,
and we'll figure that out with the folks that run this for me. So, all right. I'll be in touch with both of you. Have a good rest of your Thursday.
Take care.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Bye-bye.